Most people think inmates end up at Angola because they committed the worst crimes. But the truth is far more complicated and far more hidden. What actually sends a person to the largest maximum security prison farm in America isn't just the violence of the crime. It's a long chain of decisions made by prosecutors, judges, parole boards, classification officers, and a century-old system designed to keep the place full. This is a story that rarely gets told. Because once someone enters Louisiana's criminal court system, what happens next unfolds almost automatically. It moves like an invisible machine, steady, quiet, and built to move bodies from the parish level straight to the 18,000-acre fields of Angola. A place where inmates grow crops under scorching heat, where dorms stretch for miles, and where life sentences are more common than freedom itself. To understand how prisoners end up at Angola, you have to start far from the prison gates. It begins inside small parish courtrooms where fast-paced trials and plea deals shape a person's entire future within minutes. Many defendants walk into court with public defenders who are juggling dozens of cases at once. Prosecutors push for deals that avoid trial, knowing Louisiana has some of the harshest sentencing laws in the country. And judges, pressured by heavy caseloads and strict sentencing guidelines, often sign off without hesitation. Once a sentence is handed down, the inmate doesn't go straight to Angola. Not yet. They first enter a holding phase inside local jails. These jails act as waiting rooms for the state prison system. Here, classification officers start the process. They review the crime, the length of the sentence, the inmate's age, their disciplinary history, and even their perceived manageability. Louisiana's system is old school, and its decisions often reflect that. Someone with a long sentence, especially a violent one, is far more likely to be recommended for Angola. But length alone isn't the only factor. Angola is Louisiana's primary maximum security facility. That means it receives a massive number of inmates every year, not only people with life sentences, but also those with long terms or repeated disciplinary issues. Because Angola has space, farmland, and labor programs, the state funnels thousands of inmates there over time. In theory, the prison farm is meant for rehabilitation through labor. In reality, Angola's economy depends on inmate work, and Louisiana's prison population, heavily shaped by sentencing laws and parole restrictions, keeps the supply steady. Inside these holding jails, a classification packet is created. It can be dozens of pages long, containing the inmate's entire story as the system sees it. A committee reviews it, and if they recommend Angola, the process moves to the Department of Corrections central headquarters. Here, a final placement decision is made based on beds, needs, and historical patterns. And Angola has long been the default placement for long-term, high-custody inmates. Once the placement is official, the inmate is put on a transfer list. This list is controlled by DOC transport officers who coordinate weekly or bi-weekly runs. These transfers are not public. No announcements. No press. No warning. A deputy simply walks to the inmate's cell and says, "Pack up." The inmate doesn't know where they're going until they're already on the bus. The prison bus, often white and marked with DOC lettering, stops at multiple facilities across the state. Sometimes it picks up 5 inmates. Sometimes 50. Shackles, belly chains, ankle irons, everything is standardized. The ride to Angola can take hours. They drive past the rural fields of St. Francisville, over gravel roads, across empty stretches of farmland. And eventually, the gates open to reveal thousands of acres of land once used as a slave plantation. For many, this is the moment reality hits. Angola isn't just another prison. It's where Louisiana sends its long-timers, its lifers, its disciplinary cases. It's where men spend decades inside dormitories the size of warehouses. It's where most will work, farming corn, vegetables, or participating in field squads under strict supervision. Some inmates fight the placement. Some request a transfer years later. But the path to Angola is not a mistake, and it's rarely reversed. It's the endpoint of a pipeline that begins in a courtroom and ends at a prison built on labor, punishment, and history. A pipeline shaped by sentencing laws, overcrowded local jails, and a system that leans heavily on Angola's infrastructure. To understand why Angola continues to receive so many inmates, you have to understand how Louisiana designed its prison system. Angola is the final destination for thousands because it has more space, more labor programs, and more long-term beds than any other facility in the state. It is, in many ways, the anchor of the entire Louisiana Department of Corrections. Without Angola, the system would not be able to handle its prison population. And because of that, every decision made in those early courtroom moments carries the weight of this massive institution behind it. Understanding how prisoners end up at Angola means looking at every step in this chain, from the laws that shape sentencing to the committees that decide classification. It means understanding the invisible machine that keeps the prison farm running and keeps the population flowing. And that's what this documentary will uncover, step by step, chapter by chapter. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. Before an inmate ever steps foot inside Angola, their journey begins in a place that looks nothing like a prison. It begins inside Louisiana's parish courthouses, old brick buildings with wooden benches, buzzing fluorescent lights, and crowded hallways where cases move fast. This is where the future of a defendant is decided long before anyone mentions the Department of Corrections, classification packets, or prison farms. Most people imagine trials, evidence, and dramatic moments in front of a jury. But in Louisiana, like most of the United States, the system runs on plea deals. Nearly 95% of criminal convictions come from plea agreements, not trials. That means most defendants never have their story heard in court. Instead, prosecutors and defense attorneys meet behind closed doors, trade offers, and try to settle cases quickly. For the defendant, the options are rarely balanced. Public defenders in Louisiana carry some of the heaviest caseloads in the country. Many juggle over 100 active cases at once. That means they barely have time to meet clients, let alone investigate every detail. Prosecutors, on the other hand, often push for steep sentences, especially in cases involving drugs, robbery, armed violence, or repeat offenses. Their leverage comes from strict Louisiana sentencing laws. Some crimes require mandatory minimums. Others allow prosecutors to enhance a sentence if the defendant has prior convictions. A simple case can suddenly turn into decades in prison. For many defendants, the courtroom moment feels rushed. They sit next to a lawyer who might have met them only once or twice. The prosecutor reads the charges. The judge asks a few questions, and then the defendant must choose: accept the plea deal or risk a much longer sentence at trial. That pressure leads many to accept terms they barely understand. But those decisions are exactly what shape who ends up at Angola. Because Angola isn't just for violent offenders. It's for long-term offenders. In Louisiana, long-term sentences are common. Crimes that might earn 5 to 10 years in other states can lead to 20, 30, or even life in Louisiana because of habitual offender laws and enhancements. With even one prior conviction, a person can face drastically longer time. These long sentences, especially anything over 20 years, dramatically increase the chances of being sent to Angola. Once the sentence is pronounced, the judge signs documentation known as the commitment papers or the minutes of court. These documents officially hand the defendant over to the custody of the Louisiana Department of Corrections, DOC. The defendant is then taken back to a parish jail cell, no longer under the sheriff, now officially a state inmate. But the courtroom moment still isn't the end. The type of crime, the length of the sentence, the age of the defendant, and even their behavior in court can be noted in their record. These details follow them into the next stage. Some judges write recommendations. Some prosecutors make comments about custody levels. Even though the DOC makes the final decision, these courtroom notes influence the classification process later on. There's another key factor: Louisiana's complex sentencing structure. Certain sentences eliminate parole eligibility. Others restrict good time credits. Some require at least 85% of the sentence to be served. In many states, inmates may earn significant reductions through programs. In Louisiana, these reductions are limited, especially for violent or repeat offenses. This means that once a person is sentenced to a long term, they're actually expected to serve most of it. That reality makes Angola the natural placement. In parish courtrooms, families often cry, plead, or offer support. But the courtroom machine moves quickly. Judges have full dockets. Prosecutors push for closure. Public defenders try to keep cases moving. The defendant is one of dozens being processed that day. The decisions made in minutes determine the rest of their lives. And yet, for many who end up at Angola, this moment is the least understood part of their journey. There is also the role of race and poverty. Louisiana's justice system disproportionately impacts Black defendants and those from low-income backgrounds. Many can't afford bail. They sit in local jails awaiting trial for months or even years. The pressure to accept a plea increases the longer they wait. And because Angola is historically tied to its plantation past, with its workforce made up largely of Black inmates, the pattern continues through this pipeline. After sentencing, the defendant's life changes immediately. They are now on a path that is mostly outside their control. The courtroom has done its part. What happens next belongs to the state prison system. Some will hope for a local facility. Some will ask for a medium security prison. But none of that matters at this stage. The paperwork is sent to the DOC headquarters in Baton Rouge. From there, the invisible machine takes over. The courtroom is the beginning of the Angola journey because it determines two crucial things: the length of the sentence, the official classification level the inmate will likely require. And these two factors, especially combined, are what make Angola the final destination for thousands. Judges rarely think about Angola specifically, but every long sentence they hand out increases the chances that the inmate will eventually be placed there. Courtrooms also set the tone for how the inmate will be viewed by the system. Were they respectful? Did they have disciplinary issues during the trial? Did the prosecutor describe them as a danger? All of this becomes permanent information that classification officers will later review. The Angola story doesn't start at the prison gates. It starts in the courtroom, a place filled with fast decisions, overwhelming caseloads, and legal pressure. A place where outcomes are shaped by a mix of policy, power, and circumstance. A place that funnels thousands of men toward one destination more than any other: the cotton fields of Angola. This chapter explains where the journey begins. The next chapter explores what happens immediately after, the holding phase inside Louisiana's parish jails, and how classification officers start the process that decides who gets sent to Angola. After the courtroom doors close and the sentence is set, the defendant is taken back to a parish jail cell, but now they are no longer a local inmate waiting for trial. They are officially a state prisoner under the custody of the Louisiana Department of Corrections, DOC. This moment marks the beginning of a long, administrative process that silently shapes the lives of thousands. Classification. Most people never hear the word classification, yet it is the most important decision in an inmate's journey. Classification determines where someone will serve their time, what level of security they require, what programs they'll be allowed to access, and ultimately whether they will be sent to Angola. This process begins inside parish jails that also function as temporary holding centers. These jails, scattered across Louisiana's 64 parishes, weren't designed for long-term housing. Many are overcrowded, underfunded, or understaffed. But for the DOC, they serve as sorting rooms, the place where prisoners wait while the state decides their fate. During this waiting period, a classification officer begins assembling what's known as an offender packet. This packet can be dozens of pages long and includes court documents, sentencing information, criminal history, arrest reports, prior jail behavior, medical needs, mental health notes, and in some cases, risk assessments. Everything from a defendant's courtroom attitude to their physical condition is recorded. For the inmate, this is the first time they realize that the system is building an identity for them, not with them. Inside these packets, two details matter more than anything else: the length of the sentence and the nature of the offense. Louisiana uses a security scoring system that classifies prisoners from lower custody levels to the highest, maximum security. Long sentences, especially anything beyond 20 years, almost guarantee a higher custody score. Violent convictions, firearm use, escape history, or disciplinary problems increase the score further. And then there's the unspoken rule. Angola is Louisiana's home for long-term and high-security inmates. It has the space, the manpower, the farm operations, and the institutional structure to handle inmates with long or complicated sentences. Because of this, when classification officers see a life sentence, a 40-year term, or even a 25-year sentence with limited parole opportunities, the path often leads in one direction: Angola. But the process isn't instant. Inmates can spend weeks or even months in parish jails waiting for transfer approval. While they wait, more information gets added to their packet. If they fight, argue, get into altercations, or struggle emotionally, it can influence their classification score. Some parish jails are crowded, chaotic, and stressful, making it easy for minor issues to escalate. And every incident, no matter how small, is recorded. The DOC eventually receives the packet at its headquarters in Baton Rouge. A classification board or central office specialist reviews it. This isn't a meeting with the inmate present. There is no discussion or interview. The board reviews documents only, meaning the inmate's entire identity is reduced to paperwork. The board then assigns a custody level and a facility recommendation. When a long-term inmate's file arrives, classification staff look at several key factors. Length of the sentence, mandatory minimum years before parole, type of offense, especially violent crimes, criminal history, disciplinary history, programming needs, prior commitments to DOC, age and physical capacity, mental health stability. If the sentence is long, the file almost always triggers a high-security recommendation. And Angola, being the largest maximum security prison in Louisiana, becomes the logical placement. Around 70 to 80% of Louisiana's long-term inmates are housed at Angola because other prisons don't have the space or infrastructure to keep them for decades. There is also the economic reality. Angola's entire operation relies on inmate labor, farming, maintenance, kitchen work, field squads, horticulture, construction, garment factories, metal shops, and more. Long-term inmates provide a stable workforce. Short-term inmates rotate out too quickly to fill these roles. This makes long-term placements at Angola not only practical for security reasons, but essential for the prison's functioning. Parish jail officials often know this pattern. Many tell inmates directly, "You got a long sentence. You're going to Angola." And in many cases, they're right. Once the classification board assigns Angola as the placement, the DOC schedules the inmate for transfer. But this schedule is rarely predictable. Transfers can be delayed due to bed availability, transport shortages, or administrative backlogs. Some inmates wait months, living in overcrowded parish jails not built to house long-term offenders. During this time, DOC transport teams monitor a roster. When enough inmates in a region are cleared for placement, the team schedules a bus run. Inmates receive no advance notice. One morning, without warning, officers come to a cell and say the words that change everything. Pack up. The inmate packs whatever little belongings they have, usually a small bag or property sack filled with paperwork, hygiene items, or letters. They are shackled at the wrists, waist, and ankles. They join a line of other inmates being loaded into a DOC bus. Every moment is controlled, every movement supervised. From the outside, this entire process looks orderly and official. But for the inmate, it is confusing, silent, and disorienting. They are moved like pieces through a system they don't understand. They aren't told why they're going to a specific prison. They aren't shown their classification papers. They aren't part of the decision-making process at all. The classification system is not designed to ask the inmate what they want. It's designed to place bodies where the state needs them. And because Angola is the largest maximum security prison in Louisiana, it receives more inmates than any other facility. The courtroom decided the sentence. Classification decides the destination. For many, this is when the reality of Angola first becomes real. They hear stories in the parish jail. They hear other inmates whisper about the field squads, the farm lines, the lifers' dorms, the decades-long sentences, and the harsh realities of day-to-day survival. Some pray they're sent somewhere else. Others accept that Angola is almost guaranteed. But the machine keeps moving, slow, silent, and steady. The next chapter will follow the moment the transfer actually happens, the DOC bus, the long ride to West Feliciana Parish, and the first steps through Angola's gates. The day an inmate is transferred to Angola never comes with warning. It doesn't come with paperwork, early notice, or an explanation. It arrives in silence, usually at dawn, when a deputy steps into the dorm and says the words that instantly shift the air. Roll it up. You're leaving. For inmates who have been waiting weeks or months inside parish jails, this moment feels like the end of one world and the beginning of another. Some have been expecting Angola since the day they were sentenced. Others hold on to hope until the very last minute, praying their placement might be a closer, medium-security facility. But once the deputy says those words, the decision is final. The inmate gathers the only property they are allowed to carry: a small plastic bag containing letters, legal papers, and simple hygiene items. Everything else stays behind. Personal clothes, commissary purchases, and small comforts collected during their stay in the parish jail will not travel with them. The trip to Angola is stripped down to bare essentials. As they step out of the dorm, they join a line of other inmates chosen for transfer that morning. Some are headed to local facilities, some to other state prisons. But the majority of long-term inmates know exactly where the bus route ends: Angola. Deputies place metal cuffs around their wrists, secure a chain around their waist, and tighten ankle shackles. Once locked in place, movement becomes slow and awkward. The restraints are designed to limit every step. Outside, a large white bus waits with the letters LADOC, or Department of Corrections, printed along the side. These buses are the arteries of the Louisiana prison system, constantly running from parish to parish, carrying inmates across the state. The windows are narrow and reinforced. The interior is made of metal and plastic, built for durability, not comfort. Inmates board one by one, guided by officers in tactical boots and DOC uniforms. Inside, the seats are divided by steel bars. Some buses have isolated compartments for high-risk or disciplinary inmates. Others have long benches. The air is cold from the metal. The restraints clink as everyone settles in. When the bus doors close, the noise of the jail fades. The route begins. The road north. The bus pulls out of the parish jail parking lot, escorted by patrol vehicles or monitored by DOC radio communication. The ride is long. Angola sits deep in West Feliciana Parish, on land so rural that the roads narrow into gravel before reaching the gate. Most inmates spent their entire lives in cities like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, or Lake Charles. For them, this is the first time they see Louisiana's countryside roll past in miles of farmland, pine forests, and open fields. The restraint chains bite into the wrists. Ankles rub against steel cuffs. The bus hums as the engine climbs highway inclines. No one speaks. Officers don't answer questions. The riders stare out of the small windows, trying to figure out the route, trying to guess how close they are. There are no bathroom breaks, no snacks, no music, just hours of motion and metal. The bus might stop at different jails along the way to pick up other inmates. Each stop is quick and controlled. Officers count every prisoner, verify paperwork, and add more bodies onto the bus. By midday, the bus is full. The heat rises, even with air conditioning. The atmosphere becomes thick with nerves and thoughts. Inmates who have done time before sometimes whisper warnings. Don't get caught slipping. Angola ain't like nowhere else. Keep your head down. Those who have never been are silent. Their minds replay everything they've heard. The fields, the farm lines, the lifers, the tower guards, the massive size of the place. For many, Angola feels like the end of the road. Approaching the prison farm. After hours on the road, the environment changes. Highway exits give way to long, rural stretches. Civilization thins out. The bus turns onto a smaller road lined with trees. The fields open wider. The land becomes flat and endless. At this point, most inmates can tell. They're close. Angola's landmass is enormous, 18,000 acres. The prison is so large that it feels like a town. Inmates often look out of the bus window and see the perimeter fences long before they see buildings. The fences appear as thin lines at first, stretching across the horizon like something out of a distant industrial landscape. The bus climbs a small rise and descends toward the main entrance. A long stretch of asphalt leads to guard towers, heavy gates, and security checkpoints. Officers armed with rifles watch from elevated positions. Cameras turn. Radios crackle. There's no mistaking it anymore. This is Angola. Intake begins. As the bus slows to a stop, officers approach the door. They step on board, one by one, counting inmates again. The doors open, and shackled prisoners shuffle down the steps in single file. The heat outside hits immediately, a wave of humidity that clings to the skin. Angola is known for its brutal summers, and even on cooler days, the air feels different. Heavy, quiet. The first building inmates enter is the Receiving and Diagnostic Center, Angola's intake unit. This is where every new arrival is processed, searched, photographed, medically screened, and assigned a temporary housing location. Intake at Angola is strict. Officers stand in lines, giving fast, direct commands. Inmates move as instructed. The shackles come off. Clothes are replaced with state-issued khaki or denim, depending on the prison's current uniform policy. Personal items are inventoried. Some papers may be returned. Others get stored in a property room that inmates won't see again for weeks. A doctor or nurse examines each inmate. Blood pressure, weight, medical questions, mental health screening. Everything is documented, even if it only takes a few minutes per person. The goal isn't comfort. It's control. The first realization. As inmates sit on hard benches waiting for the process to finish, the reality sinks in. They are not in a local jail anymore. They are not waiting for court. They are not in transit. They have arrived at the prison that will define the next decades or the rest of their life. Many inmates later describe the same moment. The moment they hear an officer call out their name, assign them to a camp, and hand them their bedroll. That's when it becomes real. Angola doesn't feel like a regular prison. It feels like a world unto itself. A world with rules, routines, hierarchies, and a history tied deeply to labor and punishment. The transfer run is the bridge between two lives. The life of a parish jail inmate and the life of an Angola prisoner. In the next chapter, we follow what happens immediately after intake. The first steps inside the dorms, the first night on the prison farm, and the first encounters with Angola's unique culture and hierarchy. Stepping into Angola for the first time is not like entering a typical prison. It feels more like being dropped into a massive, self-contained world, a town-sized institution with its own culture, customs, and invisible social maps. The scale alone is overwhelming. Dorms stretch farther than the eye can see. Long concrete walkways cut through open fields. Guard towers rise above the landscape like permanent watchful eyes. And everywhere, there's the hum of activity. Men moving in lines, officers calling commands, tractors rumbling in the distance, and the buzz of Angola's giant farm operations. After intake, inmates are assigned to a specific camp. Angola isn't one building. It's a collection of multiple units, each functioning like a separate neighborhood. These include Camp C, Camp D, Camp F, the main prison, and others. Each camp has its own structure, its own inmate culture, and sometimes even its own reputation. New arrivals rarely know what they're walking into. They simply grab their bedroll, a thin mattress, a sheet, a blanket, and sometimes basic hygiene items, and begin the long walk escorted by an officer. The walk to the dorms is often the moment that hits hardest. Inmates describe looking around and seeing nothing but land. Huge open fields where men work in long lines under the sun, watched by mounted officers on horseback. The resemblance to plantation labor is impossible to ignore. The land's history, once a slave plantation, still shapes the atmosphere. Most new arrivals feel the weight of that history without anyone needing to explain it. Entering the dorm for the first time is its own shock. Angola's dorms are large, sometimes housing over 100 men in one open space. Rows of metal bunks fill the room like a warehouse. There are no private cells, no locked individual doors, just open space, noise, and constant movement. If inmates are lucky, they receive a lower bunk. If not, they climb to the top, balancing their property and bedroll on narrow metal bars. Inside the dorms, everything runs on routine and reputation. Angola has an internal hierarchy shaped by decades of inmate traditions. Long-timers, especially lifers, hold a natural authority. They have been there 20, 30, even 50 years. They know every officer, every rule, every pattern. New inmates learn quickly. Disrespecting these men is a mistake you don't make twice. One of the first lessons new arrivals hear is this: watch, listen, and don't talk too much. Angola runs on observation. New inmates spend days figuring out which bunks belong to which groups, who handles cleaning, who controls the phones, which tables lifers sit at, where to store property, how showers are shared, when officers do count rounds, what items can and can't be borrowed. No one hands out a manual, yet every mistake has consequences. Veteran inmates often guide the newcomers. They explain the basics: where to line up for roll call, how to avoid conflicts, which officers enforce rules strictly, and what daily routines look like. Some help out of genuine concern. Others help because maintaining order inside the dorm protects everyone, including themselves. Within the first hours, new inmates face Angola's paperwork orientation. They watch a briefing video, sign forms that explain disciplinary rules, and receive basic instructions about work assignments. But the paperwork can't prepare them for the reality outside. Angola's culture doesn't come from forms. It comes from decades of lived experience inside a system built on labor, survival, and order. The first night is always the hardest. The dorm doesn't quiet down until late. Footsteps echo across concrete floors. Fans hum. Someone snores loudly. Others pace back and forth because they can't sleep. New inmates lie awake, staring at the ceiling or at the shadowy outlines of dozens of men sleeping around them. Many describe this night as the moment when the finality sets in, the realization that this is not a short-term jail stay. This is the beginning of a long, possibly lifelong, routine. Food becomes the next adjustment. Angola's meals are plain, institutional, and predictable. Beans, rice, chicken quarters, cornbread, processed meat, and vegetables grown on the prison farm. Breakfast might come as early as 3 a.m. in some camps. Meals are eaten quickly, in lines or at long metal tables, with officers watching closely. Commissary becomes essential, a survival tool for snacks, hygiene items, and comfort foods. But new inmates don't always have money immediately. Those first days, they rely entirely on the state-issued basics. On the yard, new arrivals get their first glimpse of Angola's size. Walking across the open space surrounded by fields, they see the rhythms of prison life. Men heading to work, others returning from the field squad, some playing sports, others sitting in groups under shade structures. Everywhere, there are unwritten rules. Who sits where matters. Who talks to whom matters. Even who walks which path can send a message. Work assignments are one of the biggest transitions. Most new inmates, especially long-term ones, are placed in field squads or labor crews unless they have medical restrictions. Field work is grueling. Long hours under direct sun, supervised by officers on horseback. For some, the job assignment comes quickly. For others, it arrives after their first classification review inside the prison. But what surprises new inmates most isn't the labor, the heat, or the size of the place. It's the rhythm. Angola runs like a machine, structured, predictable, and relentless. Wake up, count. Breakfast, work, count. Lunch, work, count. Supper, dorm time, count. Lights out. The routine doesn't change for anyone, not even lifers. Time moves slowly inside the prison farm, measured in routines rather than days. The first week is filled with adjustments. Adjusting to the noise, adjusting to the routine, adjusting to the authority of both officers and long-term inmates, and adjusting to the reality that leaving isn't happening anytime soon. For many, the first days are defined by shock. For others, by silence. For some, by fear. But for all, it is a crash introduction to Angola's world, a world shaped by discipline, labor, and a social order that has existed for decades. In the next chapter, we explore what comes after the initial shock, how inmates find their place in Angola's work system, the role of field squads, and how labor defines life inside America's largest prison farm. By the time an inmate survives their first weeks at Angola, the shock begins to fade, not because the environment becomes easier, but because the routine settles in. Angola is a place where time stretches differently. Days move slowly, but years pass quickly. And for many, this prison becomes the final destination of a journey that started in a courtroom, passed through parish jails, and ended on the grounds of America's largest prison farm. What most people don't realize is this. The system is designed for Angola to keep running, and the inmates become part of that design. Angola doesn't just house prisoners. It absorbs them into a structure that has existed for generations. Understanding the final stage of that journey means understanding how Angola turns long sentences into long-term labor, order, and institutional stability. Finding a place in the system. Once the initial shock wears off, inmates begin figuring out their long-term role inside the prison. Angola relies on inmate workers to function. Almost everything, from farming to cooking to maintenance, is done by the prisoners. Work is not optional. The classification officers inside Angola evaluate each inmate's skills, behavior, and sentence length to determine where they fit. Short-term inmates might end up in kitchen shifts or cleaning details. Long-term and life-sentenced inmates are placed into more demanding jobs. One of the most iconic and controversial assignments is the field squad, the modern continuation of Angola's agricultural tradition. Men work under the sun, following commands shouted by officers on horseback. They plant, weed, harvest, and maintain thousands of acres of farmland. This labor isn't symbolic. Angola produces millions of pounds of crops each year, feeding the prison system and supporting operations statewide. For inmates who aren't assigned to the fields, there are industrial jobs: welding, carpentry, garment making, printing, plumbing, or small factory operations. These roles often go to inmates with longer sentences because they stay long enough to learn the skill and be dependable for years. Angola runs on consistency. An inmate who arrives with a 40-year sentence is far more valuable to the system than someone who will leave in 3. Routine becomes life. Over time, the routine becomes a kind of survival guide. Counts happen at the same times every day. Meals are predictable. Work hours follow schedules shaped by the seasons. Longer during harvest months, shorter in winter. Officers rotate shifts, but inmates learn who enforces rules strictly and who is more lenient. In a strange way, Angola feels like a small city. A city where nobody can leave, but everyone has a role. Men go to work, come back to dorms, attend religious services, go to medical appointments, call families, and walk the yard. The predictability is both numbing and stabilizing. Some inmates find purpose through school programs, religious groups, or hobby crafts. Angola has its own seminary program, which has produced inmate ministers who preach inside the prison. There are educational classes, re-entry courses for those with release dates, and vocational training. But for lifers, re-entry doesn't exist. Their goal becomes managing time in a way that keeps them balanced, safe, and mentally stable. Discipline and structure. Life inside Angola's camps is shaped by rules, written and unwritten. Officers enforce policy with strict consistency. Infractions can lead to loss of privileges, dorm reassignment, or time in administrative segregation. But the inmate-led order matters just as much as the official rules. Long-timers and respected figures inside the dorm maintain peace by teaching younger inmates how to avoid trouble. Respect becomes currency. Reputation becomes protection. Everyone knows who the elders are, who the influencers are, and who needs guidance. Newer inmates learn quickly. Surviving Angola means keeping discipline with both staff and fellow inmates. Most inmates adjust. Some struggle. A few challenge the system and end up dealing with consequences most people on the outside never hear about. Angola doesn't operate like a jail where people cycle in and out quickly. It's a place where tensions can simmer for years if they aren't handled carefully. The weight of the sentence. As months turn into years, the sentence begins to feel heavier. Long-term inmates often describe a moment, sometimes at year 3, year 5, year 10, where they fully understand the scale of their situation. This might be triggered by a family member passing away, a parole denial, or simply watching time move differently for everyone else. Angola's culture reflects this weight. Lifers form quiet friendships, create routines, and build stable day-to-day lives, because accepting reality is often the only way to endure it. Many become mentors, working in programs that help younger inmates avoid violence or improve behavior. Others find structure through work, focusing on skills that give them identity beyond their crime and sentence. Still, the emotional gravity of Angola is always present. Every field line, every dorm, every yard carries the history of the land, a mixture of punishment, labor, and survival. Inmates walk the same paths generations before them walked, and the system keeps moving one classification decision at a time. The cycle never stops. For every inmate who reaches their 10th or 20th year inside Angola, another new inmate arrives from a parish jail. The buses keep coming. The classification packets keep flowing. The labor demands keep rising. The machinery of Louisiana's criminal justice system continually funnels more bodies into Angola because the prison farm depends on that flow. This is what makes Angola different from most prisons. It is not merely a place where sentences are served. It is a central pillar of Louisiana's prison economy, designed to absorb long-term inmates and put them to work. As long as the state continues issuing lengthy sentences, many of which require 85% or 100% of time served, Angola will remain full. The cycle is simple. Courtroom, parish jail, classification, transfer, Angola, work, routine. Years pass. Inmates enter the system, become part of Angola's structure, and spend their lives inside its routines. Some will die on the prison farm. Others will be buried in the Angola cemetery, with wooden crosses marking graves of men who never made it home. The final realization. Eventually, every inmate understands why Angola is the endpoint. It isn't random. It isn't personal. It isn't because someone chose them individually. It's because the system is built this way. A system built on long sentences, limited parole, strict classification, and a massive prison farm that depends on long-term labor. For many, the hardest part of the journey is not the transfer, the field lines, or the dorms. It's the realization that Angola is not temporary. It is home for years, decades, or a lifetime. With this final chapter, the full cycle is clear. From courtroom decisions to cotton fields, Angola represents the end of a hidden pipeline that defines Louisiana's criminal justice system. A pipeline thousands travel every year, often without understanding how or why their path was set. The story of how inmates end up at Angola is not a simple one. It isn't a path shaped by a single decision, a single courtroom moment, or a single mistake. It's a chain, a tightly connected sequence of laws, policies, traditions, and institutional needs that move people through Louisiana's justice system like gears in a machine. By the time an inmate steps onto the soil of Angola, the journey has already been decided long before they ever saw the inside of a prison bus. From the crowded parish courthouses where plea deals are pushed through at rapid speed, to the holding jails where classification packets quietly determine an inmate's fate, to the DOC transport runs that deliver men to the doors of the prison farm. Every moment along the way reinforces the same truth. Angola is not an accident. Angola is an outcome. It is the physical endpoint of a system built on long sentences, limited parole, and a prison economy sustained by farm labor and institutional structure. For decades, Angola has relied on a steady stream of long-term inmates to function, men who will spend years, decades, or life inside its fences, working its fields, living in its dorms, and adjusting to a routine that feels older than the prison itself. And yet, within that system, there are stories of survival, adaptation, and resilience. Stories of men who carve out meaning in a place designed for punishment. Stories of lifers who become mentors, helpers, pastors, or skilled workers who keep the prison running. Stories of younger inmates who learn hard lessons early and find a way to navigate Angola's rules without losing themselves. For many, Angola becomes a world within a world, a place where time slows, where history feels alive under every step, and where the weight of a sentence becomes something a person must learn to carry day after day. Some find structure, some find purpose, others find only the routine that defines life inside the largest maximum security prison in the United States. But whether a man enters Angola with fear, anger, confusion, or acceptance, one thing is always true. The system that brought him there is bigger than any individual. It is shaped by decades of policy, economics, and institutional needs that continue to influence who gets sent to the prison farm and why. Understanding that system, from courtroom to cotton fields, is the key to understanding Angola itself. Not just the prison, but the entire pipeline that feeds it. A pipeline thousands travel every year without ever realizing how much of their journey was set in motion long before their arrival. This documentary has revealed the hidden steps, the secret mechanisms, and the overlooked decisions that carry inmates from the front steps of a courthouse to the vast fields of Angola. But the story doesn't end here. Because as long as the system remains the same, the journey will continue. New court cases, new sentences, new classification packets, new transport buses making their way north toward West Feliciana Parish. And somewhere, in a parish jail right now, another inmate is waiting, unaware that their path has already begun. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and share for more deep investigative stories on America's prison system.